I am the famous American, and I am here to enlighten you on the American perspective. Is it the right perspective? Probably not. But ultimately, this is our version of reality. So I want to speak to you about the concept of how we perceive Italian Americans here in the United States in contrast to actual Italians in Italy, in Europe. So specifically, if you look at our movies, you look at Hollywood, when you see movies about Italian Americans, what you're going to see, movies like The Godfather, Casino, Goodfellas, you're going to see people who look a lot like me, have these type of features that you see here. You know, for the men, hair that's kind of slicked back, nearly black hair, right? A sort of Mediterranean look, a certain stereotype. What you're not going to see is much lighter skin than mine. You're not going to see men necessarily with blonde hair or red hair or even light brown hair. You're going to see something that looks a lot like this when you see Italian Americans portrayed in movies. But specifically here in the United States, especially, let's say you go to New Jersey where there's a lot of Italian Americans, most people who have an Italian last name are still going to look like this guy. They're not going to have lighter skin than mine. They're not going to have lighter hair than mine. They're less likely to have blue eyes. Less likely, I'm not saying. Actually, I know people who are Italian Americans that have blue eyes, but specifically, we're looking at certain features when we see an Italian American. What I do recognize, and I accept as truth, that in Italy, it's not necessarily that way. It's almost like there's a certain sampling of Italians that we have here in the United States, and that's what we think of when we think of what an Italian should look like, is Italian Americans. What I accept though, in actual Italy, you're going to see men with lighter skin than mine, blue eyes, blonde hair. You're going to see that, and that's going to be normal. Because I suppose in Italy, there's not so much a thing of looking Italian as there is here in the United States. There's definitely an Italian look, and it's quite similar to the Jewish look, which is why so often you'll see Jewish actors play Italian actors or Italian actors play Jewish actors. Again, just look at the Godfather movies and you can see a good example of that, or even Casino. Either way, they're quite interchangeable because it's a very predictable look. Now, what I believe, my theory is, here in the United States, that sample, that stereotype happens for a reason, because ultimately the people who left there to come here to the United States were the people who had those specific features. Same thing with Jewish Americans. Jewish Americans specifically have a certain look here in the United States, whereas in the rest of the world, yes, again, lighter skin, darker skin even, but ultimately there's a certain look that Jewish people have in the United States, and again, probably looks a bit like this. Or it's funny because Paul Rudd is a Jewish American actor, and he's the least Jewish looking of many Jewish actors, but he still is. So ultimately, I think it's interesting, but still, you're looking at a guy who's going to have the dark hair. He's going to have a certain look that still, he could at least play a Jewish person in a movie and get away with it because he is, but he still has that look. There's a predictable look, and that's the point of this video, is to basically share with you this theory that here in the United States, we got certain samplings of what it means to be an Italian and what it means to be Jewish. We got certain samplings that ended up here, and they become a stereotype, a certain look, and you see that in our movies. Very rarely are you going to see a movie where a person who's supposed to be Jewish or Italian and they have lighter features. I'll think of one exception, and that would be Willy Wonka. Gene Wilder. I'd say he's blonde hair. I'd say he's blue-eyed, and he's Jewish. His real name, I think, was like Jerome Silberman, something like that. Jerome Silberman, something like that. So ultimately, but he wasn't playing a Jewish person necessarily, and he just happened to be a Jewish actor. I think this is interesting. I think it's not a coincidence that Americans perceive Italian Americans and Jewish people as having a certain overall look. Not light skin, not necessarily super dark skin either, not blonde hair, not red hair, but darker brown, black. That is the idea that comes to our mind. Can anyone agree with at least why America perceives Italian and Jewish Americans in that way? And then likewise, we attribute to that to overseas in Europe, and we struggle to think that there could be blonde Italians or redheaded Jewish people. It's strange to us because it's not what is portrayed in our movies in Hollywood. And it's not what we see here in the United States. Your thoughts belong right here.